Alrighty, so today we are going to talk about the Seattle Sounders in the season preview, and these next two teams I'm going to talk about in the season preview is going to be involving in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but they will not be playing before the season begins. This is one of two teams that, of course, got the reward of able to win a big competition to skip their way into round number 16. In the case of the Sounders, of course, winning the Leeds Cup pretty much now bypassed the first round, and they're going to be in the round of 16 that is going to happen somewhere in March. But yeah, for the Sounders, last season I mentioned that there's two ways you can look at last season. On one hand, you can say that it was a pretty successful season because they did win some silverware for the first time in quite some while, and they had definitely one of the crowning moment that the Seattle Sounders had in franchise history, beating Inter Miami in front of a sold out Lumen Field. But on the other hand, obviously we know what happened in the playoffs, and the fact that I feel like that Leeds Cup run really just kind of push the brink of this team, and also injuries didn't help as well. They suffer some major injuries throughout the season, and they kind of ran out of gas last season. Eventually, a first round exit in the hand of Minnesota United, a team that they used to own for the past couple of years, but last season that was a different story. It's kind of like the little brother now seems like are starting to get some revenge over the Sounders last season itself. But yeah, there's no doubt that heading into this season, there is definitely going to be a question about the depth and also the health of this team as well. Maybe a little kind of spoiler alert in terms of some of the free big question I mentioned about the Sounders. But there's no doubt that this team is looking to once again have high expectation of compete in multiple competition. But last season they finished with 15-10-9 record, finished with 55 points. They were eliminated by Minnesota United in the first round. The last playoff appearance was 2025, but the last MLS Cup was 2019. So it started to get been a while since the Sounders have won MLS Cup, and I'm pretty sure Sounders fans, as much as this team has been so successful for a decade and a half now, ever since they came into the league. Besides that one blip that they had in 2022 that they didn't make it to the playoffs, this team have still only won two MLS Cup, and the last time that they, of course, won it, it started to kind of become a little bit of a distant memory now. Now, last five season, as I mentioned, last year they finished 15-10-9, finished with 55 points. They were eliminated by Minnesota in the first round. And then 2024, they finished with 16-9-9 record and finished with 57 points, but they were eliminated by the Galaxy in the Western Conference Final. In 2022 or 2023, I'm sorry, 14-11-9 with 53 points, but they were eliminated by LAFC in the second round. And then in 2022, this was the outlier year. This was easily the worst year that the Seattle Sounders have ever had in franchise history. 12-7-15, only 41 points, and for the first time in franchise history, they did not make it to the playoffs. Previous season, they finished with 17-9-8 record and finished with 60 points. So it's hard to believe that, out of all the last couple of seasons, that this was the season that they finished the highest. This is kind of like gone are the days are the Sounders considered to be a team that do very well in the regular season. And also gone are the days in terms of that meme talk about how the Sounders always finish second, death taxes and the Sounders finished second by the end of the season. But yeah, they were eliminated by RSL in the first round, and that was the David Ochoa game that is, and one that Sounders fans does not want to remember as well. Now, looking at some of the transfer that they made, so unsurprisingly, they didn't really make a lot of big move during the winter transfer window. This is not a team that's known to make moves in the or in the winter transfer window. It's more known for it in the summer transfer window, but they did bring in some depth pieces. They of course got Ryan Saylor and Max Anchor. I even made a joke about how the fact that it feels very Seattle Sounder like that the fact that they decided to bring in those two guys with those two guys with a last name that fits perfectly in terms of the Seattle area. But they also got Nikola Pekovic from Charlotte FC. Now, this one could be a big signing because a lot of people are saying that he seems like it's going to be the heir of Ober Vargas. Once Ober Vargas moved on, it feels like Nikola Pekovic is going to fit into that role, and it's going to be interesting to see how he will do. There is definitely a lot of potential that he's shown, especially during his time with Crown Legacy, but it just really never worked out with Charlotte FC. We'll see whether or not now him going to Seattle, a little change of scenery, whether maybe that will fulfill his potential that he definitely has. And especially, there's definitely a lot of pressure in terms of him being the potential replacement of Ober Burgas and how big of a shoe that has to be filled for the Sounders this season potentially. In terms of players that's no longer in this team, they lost Danny Leva, who of course gone to Liga MX with Necaxa. They also lost John Bell, who I believe is still a free agency if I'm not mistaken. Or actually, no, I think he got picked up, but I don't exactly remember which MLS team, of course, picked him up. They also don't have Trevian Sosa, Jacob Castro, Leo Burnley, Ryan Kent, who of course is a free agent, and then the most important out on this list besides Danny Leva, Apollo. He announces retirement recently, and you kind of sense that was going to be the case. When last season when he signed that 1 year contract, you just kind of had a sense that this was probably his final year, and especially with the injuries that he kind of dealt near the end of his career and that torn ACL he suffered, it just really never recover well enough to look like his old self, and that can happen when you have a guy that is near the end of you, their career. That yeah, it's definitely tougher to recover a torn ACL when you're in your mid 30s than when you're of course are still in your early 20s. And yeah, as much as João Paulo definitely brings some big moment for the Seattle Sounder franchise, this is definitely going to be a bit of a loss and kind of a sad one for Sounders fans to see one of their legendary midfielder hang up his boots this offseason. Now, look at the first 5 games of the season. So they have their home opener against the Colorado Rapids, but then they go on a 5 game road trip. And the reason why they go on this road trip is because Lumenfield is getting prepared for the World Cup. So that 5 game road trip start with them going to RSL before going to St. Louis. Then they play against the San Jose Earthquakes before playing against Minnesota United. Last 5 games, obviously, with the way that they have a 5 game road trip to start, you know there's going to be more home games in the back end of the schedule. And that in some way it's kind of the case for the Sounders. 3 of their last 5 games is at home. They play against Montreal at home on October 17th before playing against San Diego on the road. Then they play the Houston Dynamo on October 28th before playing against Vancouver on November 1st. And then they finish the season against LAFC. So yeah, these last 2 games is definitely not going to be easy. These last 2 games could be teams that maybe could be a little preview in terms of what they'll face in the playoffs, because as I always say, death taxes, and it feels like we're probably going to get a Seattle versus LAFC matchup again this year. And although it didn't happen last year because of them losing in the first round, that is, I feel like it's imminent the fact that we're probably going to get it in the playoffs again this year. Now look at the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So as I mentioned, this is one of 2 teams that gets the free pass when it comes to not have to play in the first round. So as a result, when it comes to the preseason, they don't have to worry about starting their preseason relatively early and get ready to get themselves back to competitiveness. They, along with pretty much the other 23 teams in MLS right now, get a chance to prepare for their first game of the season, which will happen in their season opener against the Colorado Rapids on February 22nd. But yeah, by the time they enter in the competition, they're going to be playing either Vancouver or Canada in this. Most likely, it's going to be the Vancouver Whitecaps that they're going to be playing. And in that second leg, it's also a bit of a special game too, because as I mentioned, Lumenfield is preparing for the World Cup, so they're not going to have a chance to play at Lumenfield for their CONCACAF Champions Cup game against the Vancouver Whitecaps. Instead, they are going to drive all the way on the other side of Washington State. They're going to go to Spokane for their game as well, and that should be very interesting to see. Of course, making the trip out there and also playing there for the first time ever. It's not very often we see MLS team decide to move their CONCACAF Champions Cup game to another city, but again, this is kind of necessary because of the way that Lumenfield is preparing for the World Cup that's going to be coming in just a couple of months. Now, look at the strength of this team. It's got to be the starting 11. When they do have the strongest starting 11, I do think that this is definitely one of the top 5 roster in this league. The problem is they haven't had a lot of those times where they had the strongest starting 11, and this is just not like last season. This has been the case with the Sounders, where it feels like every single year the Sounders at some point of the stretch does suffer some major injury. And I think last season, not only that was kind of the case, it was really the case because they along with Inter Miami play among the most games that any MLS team has ever had. And when you play so many games like that, I already talked about before where teams have already had problems when it comes to trying to compete in multiple front in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and also MLS. Well, now you add to the factor that they have last year they competed in the Leeds Cup in the FIFA Club World Cup as well. And not to mention, I don't remember. I don't think they were in the Concacaf Champions Cup, if I'm not mistaken, last year as well. But they were definitely in the Leeds Cup, and they of course make that run all the way to the final before beating Inter Miami in the final. That really took a huge toll on this team. That's kind of the reason why this team hasn't really had their strongest starting 11, and it's almost like a rarity when they do get their strongest starting 11 on the pitch. The weakness, it's got to be the depth. The depth is definitely a bit of an issue. They did lose a couple of it, especially in the midfield as well. I know they recently got Pekovic and also Hassani Dotson, but I don't think it's enough, especially if they do lose Ober Vargas, either between now and the end of the primary transfer window, or better yet, they lose him during the summer, which that could be a huge possibility because a lot of European teams are interested in getting him, especially with the way that Ober Vargas have mentioned that he wants to go to Europe. Yeah, then now you lose some, not only some quality in the midfield, but also some depth as well. So that kind of brings me the first big question of this team is the fact that how long they can hold on to Obar Vargas. I do think that they will hold on to him in the winter. I mean, I know there's been some Liga MX interest, but Obar Vargas have repeatedly turned down those requests. The Sounders also did the same thing, and it's a smart move for them to turn down these Liga MX requests because I feel like as much as I know there's been a lot of young players that have gone down south of the border to continue to develop their career, it's really kind of worked out very well. So I think Ober Vargas is pretty smart about this, and that yeah, he's definitely thinking he's ready to go to Europe, and I don't blame him. I mean, he is by far one of the most talented player in this league. Last year, he was number one on the list in terms of 22 under 22, and he's been showing that potential for a very long time. And I would not be surprised. It's going to be a hefty amount that the Sounders will command, maybe even upwards to upwards around 8 figures that they might have to ask for any of these European teams to try to get a hold of over Vargas. And then of course, as I mentioned about them staying healthy, can they do it throughout the season? And I'm not saying that they need to stay healthy entirely throughout the season, that they need to have their strongest 11 to stay healthy, because that's not possible. Like every single team is going to suffer injuries there and there, and obviously it's not possible even in the beginning of the season because you still wonder what's the health status of Pedro de la Vega, especially last season. He suffered that brutal injury near the end of the season. You don't know if he's fully recovered yet to start games in the beginning of the season. But yeah, obviously staying healthy is going to be a big challenge for this team. And also, I just realized my laptop is about to run out of battery, so let me just plug it in before it accidentally shut off while I'm doing this video. But yeah, as I said, it is going to be a challenge as well. I would say that the back line is definitely going to be one that they'll also hope to stay healthy because again, last year they definitely got some major injury at the back line. I mean, Yamar missed his fair amount of time. It got so bad to the point where they were putting John Bell and Kim Ki at the back line at some point of the season. Yeah, that's definitely you can see why this team started to struggle near the end of the season, especially on the defensive end, because when you don't have the likes of Yamar and Jackson Reagan there at the back, it definitely takes a bit of a hit when it comes to the quality of on the defensive end for this Sounders team. And then the last big question of this team is: do they have enough depth in terms of complete in multiple competition? I mean, again, I think the answer right now is no, considering that when we see with this team when they do put in some of their depth pieces in their team, they're not as strong as they are when it comes to their starting at 11, and when it comes to multiple competition, we saw last season when they tried to do that, it didn't quite worked out for them. So again, it's all about maybe adding more depth pieces as the season goes along, and maybe even get a big piece in the summer transfer window as well. That's kind of usually where the Sounders tends to do their business. But when it comes to prediction of this team, the high, I'm gonna say second because again, I'm going with that old meme about the death taxes and the Seattle Sounders finishing in second place. If they can stay healthy throughout the season, that is, I do think that they can definitely be one of the top team in the Western Conference. I mean, last season they've shown out that period of the time that they were a menace in the West, especially during that Leeds Cup run, and even during that period, they were an unstoppable force. Low, I would say it's going to be 6 plays, and that is all depends on, of course, if this team once again go through an injury crisis, and the fact that because they're competing in multiple competition, if they're gonna go deep in some of these competition, there's gonna be some sacrifices when it comes to their the games that they have to sacrifice. And the 5 game road trip to start the season after their home opener, that's going to be very tough. Like, it's not easy to go through that long of a period. And I would say, I always say, whenever a team go for a long uh road trip, as the Sounders will have to do, the goal, of course, is just fight and survive, and at least keep yourself above the red line, if possible. I mean, nowadays, I feel like with the way that the last couple of years, it seems like the road teams started to have more dominance. Maybe that might not be just the message, and the Sounders is a team that has shown the ability to do very well on the road as well. But again, when you have that many road game, it's usually going to really start to become an effect near the tail end of it, because when you have such a long road trip, to that, it started to kind of take a toll on the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if this team maybe start well on their 5 game road trip, but at the end, that's when they're just hoping to crawl the way to maybe get a point, or even if they do lose games, at least they can look forward to the fact that they're going to be finally back at Lumen Field and have at least a bulk of the game in the second half of the season, because they play on the road so many times in their first couple of games of the season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at the Seattle Sounder in the season preview. As always, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this season preview? And if you're a Sounders fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, the free big question, and your prediction of how this team is going to do heading into this season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.